What's in a game? There's a goal, an objective, and different ways to reach it. Sometimes there's characters, sometimes there's a story, but what if a game wasn't being played by the player? What if the objective was something the creator has to achieve rather than the player? I entered the Boundless Games Jam, hosted by Boundless Games. As a fan of Reese, I I don't know how to pronounce his second name, sorry. I knew I had to enter this jam and make something special. But every game jam seems the same nowadays, and honestly, with the theme being revealed as one button, it wasn't much help. It has kind of become the routine for doing well in the game jam to make some kind of puzzle platformer with cute style graphics and retro music, and I could have done that. I've even tried doing cute games before for game jams and they did well, so I know the formula works, but the thing is, it doesn't work to make a cheerful, happy, colourful game when you're feeling anything but that. As the members of my Discord, or I guess the Foo cult would know, I'm not the most cheerful person on the planet, and like everyone, I have those days where things aren't so bright. I'm just not someone who will pretend otherwise. I don't put up a happy, enthusiastic front if it's not genuine. And so when I started work on a game for this jam, I didn't want to necessarily make the perfect game for the player. I wanted to make a game for me. And yeah, I know how selfish that sounds. I just had some things to get off my chest, and I wanted to make a game with a bit more than just a story, but a strong message too. And the objective isn't something reached by the player, but communicated to the player to make them stop and think. As the theme was announced, I thought of a few things, but deep down I wanted to make another narrative game, and keeping with the theme, I thought I'll make a point and click adventure style game. Kind of like Grim Fandango, with an inventory of objects you collect which can be used on the environment around you. I thought about a game where you escape from a burning house with a twist, and it all became a metaphor for something else, which I'll go into detail later. It took me 2 days to really finalize the idea and write down enough notes and dialogue to get started, so I really only started making the game on the 3rd day. A bit more pressure on me now, but I could still pull through. I started by drawing up a mock-up of what I wanted the game to look like. I used the Coldfire Game Boy palette for most of the environment, and I also used the Foxfire palette for extra variety and to distinguish objects. Also did black for the UI. So I drew up this mock-up. I went for 1 bit per object style. I hadn't even tried before, but I always wanted to. I think keeping it simple really helped with the time pressure, but also helped to fit the mood of the game. I didn't want to make something that looked cute, you know. Kept this art style simple because I didn't want the art to distract from the rest of the game's vision, but everything was detailed enough so that the player could identify what it was. Text box for dialogue and inventory was in black and white. I used the Gravity Regular 5 font by John Watson. Then I started making the game. Added background and some objects. The objects were given a script to be clickable and contained some information such as item name. I then added a game manager which holds the game state and player inventory. When an object is clicked, it gets added to the inventory and the seen object is destroyed. I had the UI set up with a panel and text for dialogue and text for updates at the top. When an object is added to the inventory, a notification comes up. The inventory in the game is set up as a button which goes through each item in the player's inventory. If the item is active, it's the currently equipped one. I set up the button and also added nothing as an option for when the player wants nothing equipped. Other than equipment, other objects can be interacted with in the game. I made a type called furniture which displays information in update text when it's clicked. These objects will be part of the environment. To progress the game, these objects may need to be interacted with by a certain equipped item. Furniture has fields for having a piece of equipment destroy them. Different messages show up in update depending on what is equipped and what furniture is clicked on. I started making a state-based dialogue system similar to the one in Goodbye Miss Cyanide, but a little more organized. I had a next button which would show when the stage's text was still going, and it would proceed to the state and dialogue. I also had checks on the furniture to limit when interactions can happen. This would keep the story and game flow intact. I started importing art and sprites and font into the game based off the mock-up. Soon enough, I had the first scene completed. The player was given a simple idle animation and the font was adjusted to make all the text suitable. Here is a playthrough of the first stage. The crowbar is an equipable item, so when it's hovered over, a white outline highlights it. This helps the player know that it's a pickup item. Now, I'm not going to show you the other stages, etc., because I don't want to spoil the game, and the process was very similar to making the first scene. Here is me making an animated title screen. I set up the title to do a looping, hovering animation, and there's a cutscene that plays beforehand which reveals the title. Okay, so I submitted the game and came 42nd overall out of 150, which was great because it meant that I got to see Reese play my game live, and man, it was interesting. Okay, so at this point in the video, I'm going to spoil most of the game, so pause here and go play the game if you haven't already, and come back once you're done. This game got a bit of an interesting reception. Some called it a funny and interesting mystery. If you found it funny, I'm going to assume you played it with the sound off. My voice acting at the end was an idea I had that kind of tossed and turned back and forth in my head. I was trying to figure out whether I should add something like that. In the end, I realised I had enough time, so I thought it's the best thing to do, and it would be to make people aware that there's more to the story than meets the eye. I kind of just prepared myself to say some things into a mic at like 1 AM, and I had some notes written down, but it wasn't really scripted. The feedback showed that the message was still a bit confusing though, although it became clear that the game isn't really about a house or a fire. It's all a metaphor for a more deep-seated issue. The player wakes up to hear that their house is on fire, and as they progress through the game, they learn that the house isn't actually on fire but has been planted with lights and smoke machines to give the effect that the house is on fire, but it isn't. And you have people around you telling you that it is. Your neighbour who is called out to you first, the news reporter who sees from the outside and tries to convince you too. You start believing them, second guessing yourself, and it's only once you escape the house you are free from the fake surroundings. This is a story about gaslighting, a tactic used to often perpetrate vulnerability onto a victim. The victim is constantly fed lies, and when they challenge those lies, they're told they are crazy and convinced that there's something wrong with them. Victims often start questioning their sanity, and in this game, the house represents the victim's state of being, and the neighbour is the gaslighter. The neighbour tells the victim that their house is on fire or that their mental state is unwell, that they have an issue, but the issue is not real. The victim finds out that the gaslighter has perpetuated a false narrative. The neighbour does not seem to have a bad intention. They may genuinely think that the house is on fire. They want to be a saviour even in cases where it isn't needed. The neighbour might think the victim is suffering from mental health issues and that they need help, but they are on the outside looking in. They see a house on fire and want to save it, and yet they might not realise it, but they're causing more harm than remedy. Only once the victim has broken through the lies and deception can they come out of being gaslighted. To a third party, the situation is even murkier. They may not realise gaslighting is going on and could pile on to the situation by interfering. This is represented by the news reporter who comes in and increases doubt on the victim. Some people misinterpreted the part where the neighbour asks the victim, "Have you taken your meds?" as the victim having a mental health issue. But that is more that the victim may already have some kind of medical condition, but anyone could be gaslighted regardless of their medical condition. And often it is already those who have a medical condition that they're more vulnerable to this tactic because it could be exploited by the gaslighter to make their narrative even more realistic. The last dialogue in the scene is the victim noticing smoke coming from the neighbour's house, and in a moment of clarity, it is realised that the actions of the neighbour stem from a more personal issue. The neighbour's house is on fire and they projected it onto the victim instead of addressing it themselves. Once the victim escapes a toxic environment, they can see what has happened and that they've been manipulated. It's like they've escaped a prison or a burning house. I know this game was a bit of a dark one, and it's kind of interesting that I decided to make something a bit more personal, a bit more deep-seated, but it's kind of a way that I find creativity really stems. It's very similar with this, and then Goodbye Miss Cyanide was also quite personal, and I feel like a lot of my games, at least most of them, have some element of personality to them. I do like making other types of games as well, like just fun arcade ones like Melon Man, but really sometimes I feel like my creative process involves getting quite deep and personal into my own mindset. Okay, this video was a downer, so to cheer us up, here's a word from the Fennec Fu Discord server and why you should join. The Fennec Fu Discord server is one of the most active game dev communities out there. It's a lot of fun, and here's some of the members to give you some words.
In the Fennec Fu Games Discord server, you can become one with the Fu cult.
I like this server because of the Fu cult. The Fu cult is an internet movement that will take over the world one day. Oh, and I liked all the emotes and how we get to roast other servers.
Alright mate, so basically if you haven't joined the Discord server yet, I would strongly advise you to do so. We can't come up with any new fight checks, please help us.
So what I like about the Discord is we have very deep conversations. And Booba, if you're listening, I'll never forgive you. You absolute
Join the Fennec Fu Discord server, link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.